Garth Ennis is such an odd writer. Beginning his career in the early 90s on gritty UK anthology comics like 2000 AD and Revolver, he began to work for DC right as the British invasion was wrapping up. Similar to Alan Moore, Ennis is known for his dislike of traditional superheroes. However, while Moore uses this to deconstruct the idea of superheroes, Ennis uses the Punisher to kill the entire Marvel universe. He compares that finding an outlet in standard superhero stories is similar to, quote, praying that a man will come from the sky to save you. However, in a pretty funny turn of events, he's quite fond of Superman, who's arguably the most godlike of all superheroes. All of this sounds like a disastrous recipe for an edgelord king that pans to pseudo-intellectual Reddit atheists, but I have to admit, it's much more complex than that. I've never really seen a writer whose fans can acknowledge that they've released some absolute garbage, while their haters can't ignore their best. For what it's worth, Alan Moore even called him a great writer and said that he'll always have a soft spot for Garth Ennis's writing. And as we all know, Alan Moore doesn't like shit.
Mr. Moore, will you sign my DVD of Watchmen Babies? Which of the babies is your favorite?
You see what those bloody corporations do?
At his best, people consider him the definitive writer for certain characters, giving a balance of cynical humor to the uncomfortable and unfortunately realistic but exaggerated underbelly of society. At his worst, he's written off as immature edge trash and creator of some of the worst comics of all time. For example, one of the first issues of his comic Crossed ends with a couple getting sexually assaulted as their baby is getting ripped to shreds by a pack of savages that have been infected with a disease that forces them to do the worst shit they can think of. If that's not the definition of edge trash, I don't know what is. His fans will give him a pass on shock value nonsense like this because his highlights greatly outweigh it. His haters will call him edgy for the sake of being edgy, but will admit that he has some truly great books. What I'm trying to say is that Garth Ennis has the ability to do something right and create something fantastic. Well, what happens when you give this pessimistic ball of superhero hatred the beacon of hope of the Marvel Universe? Does he take the piss out of Spider-Man and write a story that doesn't really understand the character, or does he develop a soft spot like he did for Superman and write something worthy of an Eisner Award? That's exactly what I'm trying to figure out today by reviewing and summarizing his work on the anthology series Spider-Man's Tangled Web. Before we jump in, I want to give a little bit of a trigger warning that there is some body horror in this comic, so if that kind of shit freaks you out, I have other videos that I'm sure you'll enjoy, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and whatever. The comic begins with a man sitting at a diner just brewing in his hatred for Peter Parker. And right off the bat, we get a very dumb but very funny interaction when the waitress comes up to him and asks him if something is wrong with his food because he hasn't taken a bite, and he's like, I pay for the food, I'm gonna stare out this window as long as I want. During his hatred-fueled narration, he keeps reiterating how he should have been the ones who get awesome powers and fight colorful villains, and we get a close-up of his pupils which have turned into spiders. And the comic continues with our favorite web-slinger fighting Rhino. The art in this entire story is just so jarring. John McCrea has been a frequent collaborator with Ennis, and usually his pencils fit the story that Ennis is going for. But it seems that the colorist and the inker decided to go for a more traditional, colorful Spider-Man world. I'm not necessarily saying that this is a bad thing, but going from that very traditional Garth Ennis cover and knowing what his books can end up looking like, it's pretty odd to go to this spectacular Spider-Man styled art. We then get a pretty standard fight with Rhino, filled with quips, action, web slinging, all that. However, it's broken up by that man in the diner who's just seething with fucking hatred towards the wall crawler. It's such a funny juxtaposition because you have one panel of Spider-Man being like, haha, Rhino, you're too slow, but then you see the man in the diner call him a cocky little maggot. We then see that the man has actually been watching the fight this whole time just outside of the diner. And the narration continues with him saying things like, that's my life you're living. We also get a splash page of the Sinister Six, and the designs do leave a little to be desired. I've never seen a blue Doc Ock before, and Electro looks devious, but not in a really good way. The comic continues, and Peter is at home, and Aunt May calls him from the other room. She asks him if he threw her laundry in with his and emerges with her tablecloth ruined. And Peter, being the dunce that he is, mixed colors with whites. Please don't take that out of context. And she asked him what he even washed, and he says the very non-incriminating Hawaiian shirt tie-dyed kind of thing, as he covers his suit under his shirt. He profusely profusely apologizes and promises to buy her a new one, but it turns out that it's Irish linen, and in case you guys didn't know, Ireland is not in New York. Nice one, Peter. She goes to walk away, insisting to bake him a pie even though he keeps telling her to sit down and relax. We then find out that he's going to some fashion award with a girl named Sky. She asks if there will be dancing, and she mentions that Uncle Ben was a fantastic dancer. She continues with the story talking about how right after the war, while everyone else was reunited with their loved ones, dancing all around New York, she spent so much time waiting for Uncle Ben to come back, thinking of the worst. Then one day, there was a knock on the door and it was Uncle Ben, and the first thing that they did was they went out dancing. And Peter responds with "show me." And the comic continues with this absolutely adorable interaction where they begin dancing together and Aunt May starts singing to herself. Peter begins singing the same song, and Aunt May is surprised to hear that he knows this song, and he says that he's been listening to her sing it to herself his entire life. This is peak comic writing right here. After checking out his most famed work, both good and bad, I'm kind of shocked at how beautiful this interaction is. I'd expect the person who hates superheroes and wrote Cross to have Peter respond with "sure thing, bitch," and then spits at Aunt May's face when she asks if he ruined her blouses, and then, I don't know, does a kickflip or something. I apologize, Garth. I was not aware of your game. The comic continues with the angry man from earlier taking a trip down memory lane, reminiscing about how he used to bully Peter in grade school. And I mean, look at young Peter in this panel. He's just asking to get a swirly. After this trip down memory lane, we see Peter getting shooed away by Jameson because his pictures of Spider-Man aren't exciting enough. We then get this straight up cougar mama putting the moves on Peter. I at least think it's a cougar mama. She's not drawn to look very old, but Peter keeps calling her Miss Patton and she keeps calling him Kid. She offers to persuade Jameson to buy some photos, and Peter responds, "That would be so sweet," and she replies, "Call me Jess, Kid. I can get a lot sweeter," but gets cut off as Peter thanks her and runs out the door. We then see the angry man appear at the Daily Bugle. A scuffle breaks out between the angry man and the cougar mama. Unfortunately for her, nothing she's doing is affecting him. She's kicking him, spraying him with pepper spray, but he's immune to it. Also, I'm not sure if this is a UK thing, but this is the second time someone insults someone by calling them a maggot. Not really an insult you hear over here across the pond. We then get these actually horrifying panels of the angry man extending his jaw, and his eyes go completely white. He then refers to himself as the Thousand and then unhinges his jaw, and we see a bunch of red dots in the back of his throat. And the issue ends with the angry man, who I'm now calling the Thousand, has now possessed the cougar mama, with his old skin being hung up like an old Halloween costume. First impressions, I'm actually super fucking invested. I know I mentioned earlier that I wasn't really digging the art, but I think the body horror aspects contrast the cartoonish art very well, and they both complement each other. And it makes the unnerving elements that much more horrifying. It genuinely feels like the most standard Spider-Man story with a truly horrifying story just beneath the surface. Moving on to issue 2, and please, for the love of God, Garth Ennis, do not fuck this up. I am having so much fun. The issue begins, and we're with Sky and Peter at the fashion show he previously mentioned to Aunt May. He tries to make small talk to these original Xbox-looking motherfuckers, but they're not interested in what he has to say. And I love how everyone at this award show is drawn so goofy, besides Peter and Sky. Peter then overhears an exchange with some more caricatures, and in case you couldn't tell they were models, Ennis threw in a good bulimia joke. They then ask Peter what he does for work and perk up when they hear that he's a photographer. Well, besides this 2D from Gorillaz wannabe, he's too cool to change between panels. And they instantly become disinterested when they figure out that he's just a photographer for the Daily Bugle. Sky, who is rocking some very strange swirls in her hair, comes up to Peter and chews him out for always looking bored when she looks over and not showing an interest in her friends. But Peter, being the master of de-escalation that he is able to diffuse the situation by telling her that while he is out of place, he's okay because he's here to support her. And Peter, being the blabbermouth that he is, continues talking and insults her friends before being kicked out and forced to walk home in the rain. Then the Thousand, who's still disguised as the cougar mama, emerges out of nowhere and says that she needs his help. The Thousand fabricates the story about how she has a drinking problem and she was caught stealing from her boyfriend, and her boyfriend kicked her out and she has nowhere else to go and she doesn't know anyone. And Peter, being the sap that he is, offers for her to stay with him tonight. It'd be really cool if Peter had some sort of power power that could sense evil or danger. Maybe this cougar mama is inhibiting that theoretical power I just made up on the spot. We then take another stroll down memory lane. Peter and the Thousand are now in high school, and of course, Peter, who is reading a book with Ditko on the spine, is still being tormented. We then find out that Peter was bullied into writing the Thousand's paper, and he still got a D. And then Peter just gets straight up kneed in the nuts. The Thousand, whose real name we find out is Carl King, continues tormenting Peter in this flashback, telling him that all these years that Peter has been looking for help and no one has come to assist him because people don't like Peter, Aunt May included. Back to the present day, Peter and the Thousand arrive at Peter's house, and he tells her to go to the bathroom and dry off while he makes some coffee and gets her some dry clothes. She responds, "Shall I wait here while you change into Spider-Man?" And he's like, "Yeah, that's fine. My clothes might be..." Wait, what? And she spins her head around like in The Exorcist, and we get this pretty unnerving panel. She then just kicks the shit out of him and tells him that the cougar mama is long gone. Peter then does his best stepdad impression and hits her, contorting her neck and face even further. She explains that she can't be hurt, and I think she says that she can't be picked up by spider sense, and then she just chucks his ass out the window. Peter changes into Spider-Man as the Thousand contorts and scuttles after him. The Thousand is frustrated that Peter isn't putting in enough effort, saying that he wants to be fought like the Rhino, Lizard, the Hulk, etc. The Thousand explains that he's been watching Peter for a long time now, waiting and stoking his anger as he grows stronger. Peter then makes the classic superhero mistake of trying to save his villain as they're falling to their death, but unfortunately the Thousand doesn't die like Gwen Stacy, and Peter tries reasoning with the Thousand, saying to release any of the cougar mama that's left. The Thousand replies that it's way too late for that and says that he ate her from the inside out. No, not like that, unfortunately. However, the Thousand does channel his inner cougar mama and begins biting Peter on the neck. Then they both fall to the cement. Peter then reawakes in his room, tied up and paralyzed from the Thousand's venom, as the Thousand is taunting him. And then the cougar mama gives us a pretty epic panty shot. If that doesn't get you at least a quarter chubbed up, then I don't know what will. Also, I guess Peter was just visiting Aunt May because she seems very absent in all of this fucking commotion. Peter then realizes that the Thousand is in fact his childhood bully, Carl King. The Thousand takes yet a third trip down memory lane and explains that he was there the day that Peter got bit, as the art morphs into that Silver Age style that I'm sure all the old heads would have loved that have already clicked away because I dropped too many F-bombs. And the Thousand says that he followed Peter home after this, witnessing his first wall crawling and his wrestling match, and then continued to watch him as he fought crime. We're back to the present day, and the Thousand is just a fucking broken record because he just tells Peter that he should have been the one to get the powers. And he says that he got something different, something better, and something worse. Then a bunch of these fucking spiders emerge from his eyes and his mouth in a truly horrifying panel of body horror. We see the Thousand in all of his glory without the pesky skin of the cougar mama, and it's really heebie-jeebie inducing. I should take a quick second and address the elephant in the room. This comic came out in 2001, almost 2 decades before the first appearance of the fan favorite bunch of spiders inside of a person variant Spiders-Man. The comic ends with the Thousand beginning the insertion process into Peter to hopefully eat him from the inside out and use all of his powers for really heinous things. The next issue, the final one of this particular story, has probably one of my favorite comic covers of all time. Like, this is fucking sick. This kind of makes me wish that the entire comic had this art style, but it probably would have been a little much. At the beginning of this issue, Peter's neighbor bursts in to figure out what all the commotion is about, and Peter tells him to run, but he is in shock. We then get even more body horror as the Thousand shows what he's truly capable of. Peter figures out that the Thousand became this way because Carl King tried to replicate what happened to Peter. And you guessed it, we get a 4th trip down memory lane. We see that because Peter instinctively killed the radioactive spider that gave him his powers, Carl King just went a few days later and fucking ate it. He explains that nothing happened for a few days, but one morning, it began. He begins to see those spider eyes in the back of his throat. His mother comes in to tell him that breakfast is ready or whatever, and Carl is freaking out. He then does the same thing that he did to the cougar mama and launches a big fucking spider from his throat into her throat. He explains that he did this on pure instinct, saying that it was as natural as blinking and that he didn't put any thought into it. He continues the flashback and narrates that he soon realized what was happening. His body was being turned into thousands of spiders and keeping his shell upright, but all somehow shared a collective conscience. And he does what I'm sure many of you would also do in this situation. He wonders wonders if it will work again, and he fucking kills his dad. We're back to the present day, and he explains to Peter how the more he does it, the more powerful he gets and the quicker the process becomes. He then continues to brag about being a supervillain, saying that he fits the profile. Peter tells him that that's true because he loves himself so much and spent so much time explaining his twisted, fucked up mind that he forgot that the paralyzing venom was wearing off. Then Peter breaks free and stops holding back. As he's kicking the shit out of the Thousand, Peter gives him the speech that I'm sure many bullied kids just dream to give, saying that no one really liked Carl King and that he only bullied them into kindness. Then the Thousand gets angry at these words and throws Peter out the window. The way that Peter lands here is just so fucking funny. The Thousand starts yelling at Peter, airing out all of the years of jealousy and anger that have built up. He tells Peter that he had to eat his beautiful girlfriend, and Peter begins to say that he wasn't forced to and that he's just a monster looking for power, but then he starts to stomp his head in. He further explains that he had to eat her because he gets stronger with each person that he eats, and that he had to get strong for this fight, saying that he eats about a dozen people a year. He then continues by saying that he mainly eats bums, but he would eat a child every now and then, as a little treat. Then Peter gets up denouncing his fear to Carl. Sounds a lot less intimidating when you call him by his real name. And then he gives one good punch to the face, ripping open his skin bag. The fight continues and we get some strange panels. I can't really tell where Peter is punching from. Did he jump and punch? Why is he at a completely different angle? Carl throws Peter through some high voltage warning signs and goes to deliver the final blow, but he ends up hitting a huge electric box and just gets completely zapped. He then falls off the building and vaporizes. I'm probably imagining this, but it looks like some of the remaining dust in the electro orb is like a skeleton that's turning to dust, but that wouldn't make any sense because it's just a skin bag. Again, probably just making it up. The comic continues with Aunt May taking care of Peter as he spins some lie about how he fell down a bunch of stairs and he has to stay with her because his apartment is getting renovated by the landlord. And after this elaborate story, Aunt May tells him to relax and tells herself, "That's my boy, back from the wars," which I think is so quick but so meaningful. I love the idea that Aunt May secretly knows that Peter is Spider-Man, even though Peter does everything in his power to hide this secret from her. Well, not everything in his power. It seems like washing your fucking bloody suit with her expensive blouses is kind of a dumb move. He notices what she says and asks her to dance. And in this instance, I interpret this interaction as him not realizing that she knows. I think because she's looking at a picture of Uncle Ben as she said those words, he interprets it as her really missing Uncle Ben or having like some old people memory problems. Either way, we get a cute ass pan out as they dance and sing together. After this adorable interaction, we see the Thousand narrating some more hatred that he has for Spider-Man, and he's saying how it just takes one spider and he can take over the world or whatever, and he emerges from this like sewer tube. And the comic ends with him getting squished and we never hear from him again, which is such a shame because the Thousand is such a fun fucking villain. I think his shtick of what if that kid you knew in elementary school who flipped their eyelids inside out and skinned cats got superpowers works really well. While it's pretty one-dimensional, it complements the complexity and beacon of hope that is Spider-Man perfectly. It allows Ennis to flex those edgelord muscles, but it's not the main focus, so it doesn't go too far. If this comic was just about the Thousand, it would probably be really ass, but he gave just enough for me to want more. And I think that's what separates Ennis's great work to Ennis's shitty work, is that he's got to play his cards close to his chest, because if he just comes out the gate swinging with his fucking edgelord ideas, it's going to turn a lot of people away, and any deeper meaning that he's hoping for gets lost in translation. I did have some issues with the comic, mainly the art. I'm not saying that I wanted something super fucking grimy like the covers, but if the art went a little further, it would have done this story wonders. I love the Ditko-inspired Spider-Man suit with the large blacks around the eyes, and the body horror was fucking sick. I don't know how to explain it that the cartoonish style didn't do it for me except for the body horror. I'm honestly quite surprised I've never seen this discussed anywhere because I had such a fun time. And if anyone knows any Spider-Man fans, you know that they fucking mop up anything with the web slinger in it. However, to be fully transparent, even though I'm rocking a Venom shirt, I haven't really read that much Spider-Man. So I'm really interested in what any hardcore fans thought of this story because I thought it was fucking sick. If y'all got any more underrated Spider-Man comics to recommend, please let me know. I'm also really excited excited to check out more of Garth Ennis's work, and I'll admit it, starting with Crossed was a mistake. I gave a really sour primer to everything of his that I read after that for this video, and I'm not saying that I hated what I read, but I didn't go in with an open mind. And after being pleasantly surprised and kind of blown away by this, I'm totally going to give his Punisher run and Hitman another chance. If you guys want to hear my thoughts about some other comic books, click somewhere over here. Go read good stuff. Recommend me good stuff. Peace out.